Hello, everyone, and welcome to Midnight Whispers. I know many of you listen to these stories to relax and slowly fall asleep. Before we begin, feel free to leave a comment and tell me where you're listening from tonight. If you enjoy these stories, please like the video and subscribe to the channel. Now, get comfortable, take a slow breath, and let's begin. Years ago, two friends and I went camping during the fall. The kind of trip that feels calm and grounding at first and slowly turns into something you never quite shake off. We were camping in the Pacific Northwest, surrounded by dense woods that seemed to swallow sound. The air was cool and damp, the kind that settles into your clothes and hair without you noticing right away. Fall had already taken hold. Leaves were starting to rot on the forest floor, and everything smelled earthy and wet. It was beautiful, but also heavy in a way that's hard to describe unless you spent time in those woods. We weren't doing anything extreme or adventurous, just a simple camping trip. One night out in nature, away from the noise of daily life. We had a small tent, just big enough for the three of us. When we laid down to sleep, we staggered our positions to make it fit. Two of our heads were on one side of the tent, close together, and the third person's head was on the opposite side. Our bodies overlapped slightly, sleeping bags brushing against each other, the thin tent wall only inches from our faces. That night was unusually quiet. There was no wind, no rain, no animals making noise nearby. The forest felt like it was holding its breath. As the night went on, fog started to roll in, slow and thick, creeping through the trees and settling low to the ground. Even inside the tent, we could feel the moisture in the air. The kind of fog that muffles sound and makes everything feel distant and unreal. At some point, I woke up without knowing why. I wasn't startled awake. I just surfaced out of sleep, hovering in that half-awake state where your mind hasn't fully caught up yet. I lay there for a moment, listening. Everything felt still. My friend's breathing was steady. The tent was quiet. I was just starting to drift back to sleep when I heard it. At first, I thought I was dreaming. It sounded like a muffled voice, the way someone sounds when they're talking on a cell phone with bad reception. The sound wasn't loud, but it was clear enough to make out words. The voice kept saying, "Hello? Can you hear me? Hello?" Over and over again. The tone wasn't aggressive or threatening. It sounded confused, like someone genuinely trying to reach another person and failing. The strangest part was where it was coming from. The sound wasn't outside the tent. It wasn't distant. It was coming from inside the tent, from the center, right between all of our heads. It felt like the voice was coming from the exact middle point where our sleeping bags met, close enough that it felt invasive, too close. Before I could fully process what was happening, one of my friends spoke up in a low, uncertain voice. They asked, "Are you hearing that?" The moment they said it, my stomach dropped. That question confirmed I wasn't imagining it. I wasn't dreaming. Someone else was hearing it too. Immediately, all three of us sat up at the same time. Sleeping bags rustled, elbows bumped. The tent shifted slightly as we scrambled around, suddenly wide awake and alert. Our first instinct was practical. We assumed it had to be a phone. One of us must have accidentally left a phone in the tent, and maybe it was picking up a call or some weird signal. We started digging through everything. Sleeping bags, pockets, backpacks. We felt around the floor of the tent, checking every inch. The voice continued for a few seconds longer, still saying the same thing. "Hello? Can you hear me?" Then it stopped. There was no phone. We froze, hands still, breathing heavy in the cramped space. The silence afterward felt louder than the voice itself. I could feel my heart pounding in my chest. No one spoke for a few seconds. Then I turned toward my friend on the opposite side of the tent and asked them what they heard. I'm wanting to make absolutely sure we were all experiencing the same thing. They answered without hesitation. They said it sounded like someone saying, "Hello? Can you hear me?" The exact same words, the exact same tone. They also said it sounded like it was coming from the other side of the tent, not from their own side. That detail stuck with me. All three of us agreed on the same things. The words, the sound, the location, and the fact that it wasn't coming from any one person's belongings. We didn't laugh it off. No one made jokes. The mood shifted completely. The fog outside pressed in on the tent, making everything feel smaller and more enclosed. We talked quietly, trying to piece together explanations. Maybe someone nearby was on the phone. Maybe sound traveled strangely in the fog. But none of it made sense. The campground was silent. We hadn't seen or heard anyone else nearby, and the voice didn't sound like it was echoing through the woods. Oh, it sounded like it was right there with us. Eventually, exhaustion won out over fear. We lay back down, though none of us slept well after that. Every small sound made us tense. Every movement of the tent fabric felt amplified. I remember staring into the darkness, listening for the voice to come back, half expecting it to start again at any moment. It never did. Morning came slowly. The fog lingered, thick and heavy, clinging to the trees and the ground. Everything looked muted and gray, like the color had been drained from the world. We packed up quietly, all of us still thinking about the night before. Before leaving, we checked the car. All of our cell phones were sitting exactly where we had left them, untouched inside the vehicle. None of us had brought a phone into the tent, not one. To make things even stranger, there was no cell reception at the campground. No bars, no signal, nothing. Even if a phone had been nearby, it wouldn't have been able to make or receive a call. That realization sealed it for me. Whatever we heard wasn't a phone. It wasn't someone nearby. It wasn't interference or a bad signal. 3 people heard the same thing, at the same time, from the same place, and there was no physical source for it. Years have passed since that night, but the memory still sends shivers up my spine. It wasn't loud or violent or dramatic. It was quiet, confused, almost human in a way that made it worse. The voice wasn't trying to scare us. It sounded like it was trying to connect, trying to be heard, and failing. Sometimes that's what makes experiences like that linger. Not the fear, but the unanswered question. Who was speaking? Why did it sound like a phone call? And why did it happen right there, in the middle of us, on a night so still that even the forest seemed to be listening? I've been camping many times since then. I've slept in tents, cabins, and under the open sky. I've heard animals, wind, rain, and strange natural sounds. But I've never heard anything like that again, and I hope I never do. Because once you hear something that shouldn't be possible, in a place where there's no explanation, it changes the way silence feels forever. This is one of those stories that sounds almost unreal when you first hear it. The kind of thing you expect to see in a documentary or a true crime podcast, not connected to someone you know. But this wasn't distant. It wasn't abstract. It was close enough to feel personal. Close enough that it made everyone who heard it stop and think about how easily something normal can turn into something deadly. A friend of mine told me this story about her cousin. At the time, Her cousin was just living her life like any other young woman. She was using Tinder, the same way millions of people do. Swiping, chatting, matching, trying to meet someone interesting. Nothing about that felt dangerous to her. It was normal. It was modern dating. People do it every day and walk away with awkward dates, funny stories, or sometimes real connections. She matched with a guy. Their conversations were easy at first. They joked, talked about everyday things, shared interests. There were no obvious red flags in the beginning. He seemed normal, friendly, interesting enough to agree to meet in person. When he suggested meeting at his apartment, she didn't think much of it. They'd been talking long enough that it felt safe, or at least safe enough. Plenty of people go to someone's place on a first date. It's not unusual. So she went. When she arrived, everything seemed fine. The apartment looked normal. Clean, lived in. Nothing that immediately made her feel uneasy. They talked, laughed, got to know each other better. For a while, the date was going well. They were hitting it off, just like they had online. If you had walked in at that moment, you would have seen two people on what looked like a perfectly ordinary date. But as time passed, something started to shift. She couldn't point to one specific moment where things went wrong. It was more subtle than that. A feeling, a change in the atmosphere. His tone shifted slightly. The way he spoke became heavier, less casual. He started steering the conversation toward darker topics. He began talking about death. At first, she tried to brush it off. Some people are into dark humor. Some people like philosophical conversations about life and mortality. She told herself she might be overthinking it. But the more he talked, the more uncomfortable she became. This wasn't casual or abstract. There was something about the way he spoke, something intense and unsettling, like he wasn't just talking about death as a concept, but as something personal, something close. Her body reacted before her mind fully caught up. Her stomach tightened. Her chest felt heavy. That instinctive alarm went off, the one people sometimes ignore because they don't want to seem rude or dramatic. But she couldn't ignore it. The feeling grew stronger with every minute that passed. She no longer felt relaxed. She no longer felt safe. She knew she needed to leave. But leaving isn't always easy, especially when you're inside someone else's space. You start thinking about how to do it without escalating the situation. You don't want to offend. You don't want to cause a scene. You don't want to make someone angry when you're alone with them. So she made an excuse. She told him she needed to use the bathroom. He let her go without question. The moment she closed the bathroom door behind her, everything shifted. The space felt small, confined. Her heart was racing. Her hands were shaking. She knew she didn't have much time. She didn't know what would happen when she came back out, but every instinct she had told her it wouldn't be good. She pulled out her phone and called the police. She spoke quietly, urgently, explaining where she was and that she felt unsafe. She didn't dramatize it. She didn't exaggerate. She simply trusted her fear and acted on it. She stayed in the bathroom, locked inside, waiting. Every sound outside the door felt amplified. Every second felt too long. When the police arrived, everything unfolded quickly. They knocked. They entered the apartment. What they found confirmed that her fear had been absolutely justified. The furniture and the floor were covered in plastic. Not partially, not carelessly, laid out deliberately, like preparation. In the kitchen, there were different saws laid out, not tools tucked away in a drawer, not something you could easily explain away. They were out in the open, ready to be used. There was no misunderstanding. There was no innocent explanation. When the police questioned him, he confessed. He admitted that he had been planning to kill her. He admitted that he was going to do it after she came out of the bathroom. He admitted that he intended to cut her body into pieces. Those words alone are enough to make your blood run cold. The idea that someone can sit across from you, laugh with you, talk with you, while actively planning your death is terrifying in a way that's hard to put into words. It strips away the illusion that danger always looks dangerous. It doesn't. Sometimes it looks like a normal apartment, a normal guy, a normal date. The only reason she survived is because she listened to her instincts. She didn't wait to be polite. She didn't wait for proof. She didn't second-guess herself long enough to talk herself out of it. She acted when something felt wrong, even though she couldn't fully explain why in that moment. Afterward, the reality of how close she had come to dying hit her all at once. The shock didn't end when she left the apartment. It followed her. The thought that she had been sitting in a space designed for her murder, talking to someone who fully intended to kill her, is something that never really leaves you. It changes how you see people. It changes how you see dating. It changes how you trust. For everyone who heard the story, it was a wake-up call, not in a dramatic, paranoid way, but in a sobering one. It reminded us that fear isn't always irrational, that gut feelings exist for a reason, that sometimes discomfort is your brain picking up on details you haven't consciously processed yet. What makes this story especially chilling is how easily it could have gone another way. If she hadn't gone to the bathroom, if she hadn't trusted herself, if she had decided she was overreacting, if she had ignored that voice telling her something was wrong, she would not be here. The man didn't snap suddenly. He didn't act in a moment of rage. He planned it. Carefully, calmly. He set up the space. He prepared tools. He waited for the right moment. That level of intent is horrifying because it means there was nothing she could have said or done to change his mind once she was there. The danger was already decided. That's what makes the story so disturbing. Not just the violence he planned, but the calm normalcy surrounding it. The fact that it began like any other date. The fact that there were no obvious warning signs until it was almost too late. It's easy to say from the outside that people should be more careful, that they shouldn't go to strangers' homes, that they should know better. But fear doesn't always announce itself in obvious ways, and danger doesn't always look the way we expect it to. This could have happened to anyone. What saved her wasn't luck alone. It was awareness. It was listening to her body. It was acting without waiting for permission or validation. The story still circulates among friends as a warning, not to scare people into isolation, but to remind them that their instincts matter, that discomfort is not something to ignore, that being polite is never more important than being alive. Even now, thinking about it leaves a tight feeling in my chest. The image of plastic on the furniture, the saws in the kitchen, the calm confession. It's the kind of story that sticks with you, not because it's sensational, but because it's real. A normal app, a normal date, a normal evening, and behind it all, a plan that almost ended in murder. The fact that she's alive is a testament to how powerful intuition can be when you trust it. And the fact that this happened at all is a reminder of how close danger can be, even in situations that feel ordinary. That's what makes it truly terrifying. This happened last year, in April, when we went on a trip to Baguio in the Philippines. Even now, when I think about it, the memory still sits heavy in my chest. It's one of those experiences that doesn't explode into terror right away, but slowly creeps back into your thoughts when you least expect it. The more you replay it, the less sense it makes. Baguio already feels different from most places. The air is colder, the fog rolls in without warning, and everything feels quieter, almost muffled, like the city is holding its breath. On that particular day, the fog was thick, the kind that wraps around buildings and swallows them halfway, making everything look older than it really is. Our group decided to visit a hotel that was known locally for being haunted. The hotel used to be a church during World War II. Back then, it sheltered nuns, priests, and civilians trying to survive the chaos of war. According to stories, it held countless deaths, bombings, executions, even beheadings of priests. Whether every detail was true or not, the history alone was heavy enough to make the place feel unsettling. The building itself looked worn down, like it carried the weight of everything that had happened inside it. My best friend, Pauline, who everyone calls Pau, was with me, along with a group of our other friends. At first, we didn't take it seriously at all. We joked around as soon as we arrived. Pau and I screamed dramatically, laughed loudly, and acted brave as we walked around the area. It felt like a challenge, like we were daring the place to scare us. We joked about ghosts, souls, and spirits, acting like nothing could touch us. But even while laughing, there was something in the air that didn't quite sit right. The fog made it hard to see clearly, especially around the upper floors of the building. The silence between our laughter felt too deep, like it swallowed sound instead of echoing it. Still, we kept going, feeding off each other's energy, pretending the chill creeping up our backs was just from the cold weather. Eventually, we were about to leave. Everyone started heading toward the van, but Pau and I realized we needed to pee. We split from the group quickly, assuming it would only take a minute. When we were done, the others were already walking ahead, so we stayed behind near the van to wait for them. We stood there together, side by side, facing the building. The fog was still thick, especially around the second floor. The windows looked dark, empty, but somehow not lifeless. I don't know what came over me, but I decided to joke again. Maybe it was nervous energy. Maybe it was the silence. Maybe it was the way the building felt like it was watching us. I laughed and said, "Haha, don't look around the second floor windows. There are countless souls there." Pau laughed back immediately and said, "As if." Even after saying it, we both looked up anyway. We stared at the second floor windows longer than we should have. Neither of us said anything, but I could feel the mood shift. The laughter faded. The air felt colder. I felt chills run down my arms, not the kind that come from temperature, but the kind that make your stomach tighten. Still, nothing happened. No movement, no sound. Just fog and dark windows. Eventually, our friends returned, and we all got into the van to head back to where we were staying. The van was loud with conversation at first. People were joking, talking about food, laughing about how nothing scary even happened. I sat beside Pau, trying to shake off the weird feeling lingering in my chest. Then I remembered something. A few minutes earlier, while we were still waiting outside, I had received a voice message from Pau. At least, that's what my phone said. I turned to her and casually asked, "Hey, what was that voice message you sent me earlier?" She looked confused. "What voice message?" I laughed, thinking she was messing with me. Pau jokes around a lot, and I assumed she was pretending not to remember. I told her, "Stop it. You literally sent it just now." She shook her head and said she didn't. So I pulled out my phone. I opened our chat and played the voice message. As soon as it started, my smile disappeared. There was a crackling sound throughout the recording, almost like static, heavy enough to partially cover our voices. But underneath it, clear enough to understand, were our words. My voice said, "Ha ha ha, don't look around the second floor windows. There are countless souls there." Then Pau's voice replied, "As if." The van went quiet around us, but I barely noticed. I was too focused on Pao. The color drained from her face instantly. Her eyes filled with tears before I could even say anything. She started crying, not laughing, not nervous giggling, crying. She grabbed my arm and said, I wasn't even holding my phone at that time. It was in my bag. The way she said it wasn't dramatic. It was panicked, real. Her voice shook, and she looked genuinely terrified. I asked her again, thinking maybe she was forgetting or misremembering. She swore she hadn't touched her phone. She said she didn't take it out. She said she didn't record anything, and I believed her. Pa isn't the type to pull a joke like that, especially not one that would make her cry like that. Her reaction wasn't fake. It was immediate and raw. Seeing her break down made my own chest tighten, and before I realized it, I was crying too. The van kept moving, carrying us away from the hotel, but the fear came with us. We didn't scream. We didn't shout. We just cried quietly, holding on to each other, trying to process what had just happened. The others in the van noticed something was wrong and asked, what happened? We explained, showed them the voice message, and told them what Pao said. Most of them brushed it off. Some said it was probably a coincidence. Others joked that maybe Pao recorded it by accident. A few laughed nervously and said phones glitch all the time. No one really believed us. And maybe that was easier for them. But what bothered me wasn't just the recording itself. It was everything around it. Pao and I had never chatted online before this trip. Our inbox wasn't active. To find our conversation, I would have had to scroll all the way down. How did my phone even open our chat? How did it select her specifically? How did it start recording without anyone touching it? And the timing. That's what haunts me the most. The recording didn't start after I spoke. It started a second before I even said anything about the souls. As if something already knew what was about to be said. As if it was waiting. I replayed the message over and over afterward, trying to find logic in it, trying to convince myself it was just a glitch. But no matter how many explanations I considered, none of them fully made sense. Phones don't usually unlock themselves, open the exact right chat, start recording, and capture a perfectly timed conversation without any input, especially not in a place like that. That night, when we got back to where we were staying, Pao barely spoke. She stayed close to me the entire time. Neither of us slept well. Every sound felt louder. Every shadow felt deeper. I kept thinking about the second-floor windows, about the fog, about how casually I had joked about souls without really believing in them. Now, a year later, it still bothers me. I don't claim to know what happened. I don't say it was a ghost for sure. I don't say it was something supernatural with complete confidence. But I also can't say it was nothing. There are too many small details that don't line up neatly enough to ignore. What stays with me the most is how innocent it felt at first. Just laughter, just jokes, just friends teasing fear. And then suddenly, something crossed the line, quietly, without drama, without warning. That voice message exists. I heard it. Pao heard it. It captured a moment that shouldn't have been captured. And no matter how many times people tell me it was coincidence, my mind keeps going back to the same questions. How did it know? How did it start recording at exactly the right moment? And why did it feel like we weren't alone anymore, even after we left? That hotel is far behind us now, but the memory isn't. It still gives me chills. Not because of what I saw, but because of what I heard. Because of what was recorded. Because of the feeling that something listened. And maybe still is. When my dad and his twin brother were 3 years old, they were outside playing in the yard like toddlers do. There was nothing unusual about the day, no warning signs, no sense that anything bad was about to happen. They were just two little boys, identical in the way only twins can be at that age, running around together, sharing toys, laughing, existing in that carefree bubble children live in before they understand danger. Back then, milk delivery was a regular thing. The milkman would drive his truck through neighborhoods, stopping at houses to drop off bottles. On that day, he pulled up to their house and got out to make his delivery. At some point, without realizing it, he left the gate to the yard open. It wasn't negligence in the way people imagine when they look back with hindsight. It was a simple human mistake. The kind of thing that happens every day and usually means nothing. While the adults were occupied and the milkman was doing his job, the twins kept playing. At some point, their ball rolled out of the yard and under the delivery truck. To a 3-year-old, this wasn't a dangerous situation. It was just a ball, something familiar, something to retrieve. My dad's twin brother went after it, crawling or toddling underneath the truck, focused only on getting his toy back. He had no understanding of how dangerous that space was, no way to predict what was about to happen. The milkman finished the delivery and got back into the truck. He didn't know a child was underneath it. He started the engine and began to pull away. In a matter of seconds, everything changed. The truck ran over my dad's twin brother and killed him. There's no gentle way to say that, no wording that makes it easier. A 3-year-old child died instantly because of a chain of small, unintentional events lining up in the worst possible way. No one meant for it to happen. No one could have imagined it would. And yet it did. The aftermath was chaos, shock, and horror for everyone involved. For the milkman, the realization of what had happened must have been unbearable. To go to work expecting an ordinary day and end it having accidentally killed a child is the kind of guilt that never leaves a person. Even though it was an accident, even though there was no malice or intent, that weight doesn't go away. It becomes part of you. For the family, the loss was incomprehensible. But what makes this story even more haunting is what happened immediately after. My dad and his brother were identical twins. At 3 years old, they were indistinguishable in a way that went beyond appearance. Their voices, their mannerisms, their understanding of the world all blurred together. In the shock and confusion following the accident, there was a horrifying delay before anyone could even determine which twin had been killed. People kept asking my dad questions. They would ask him, "Are you Bob?" He would say yes. They would ask him, "Are you Steve?" He would say yes. He wasn't lying. He wasn't being evasive. He simply didn't understand what they were asking or why it mattered. At that age, names were interchangeable labels, not fixed identities. To him, he was both. He had always been both. He shared everything with his twin, including identity itself. For a while, no one could tell which child was gone. That detail is almost unbearable to think about. Not just losing a child, but standing in the aftermath and not even being able to name which one you've lost. The confusion, the denial, the desperate hope that maybe this was all some kind of mistake, that maybe the wrong child was being accounted for, that maybe, somehow, both could still exist. Eventually, they figured it out. Eventually, the truth settled into place. But by then, the damage was already done in a way that can't be undone. My dad grew up without his twin. That alone would shape anyone's life. Twins often describe a bond that feels deeper than friendship, deeper than siblinghood. It's a shared existence, a constant presence. For my dad, that presence was suddenly gone before he was old enough to understand what death meant. Instead of memories, he grew up with an absence. Instead of grief in the way adults experience it, he carried something quieter and more complex, a missing half, a shadow of someone who should have been there, a life that continued but not in the way it was meant to. The family carried that loss too. Every milestone after that came with an invisible question attached to it. What would it have been like if both boys had been there? What kind of person would his twin have grown into? Would they have stayed close? Would they have drifted apart? Would they have shared careers, jokes, inside references no one else could understand? Those questions never have answers. What happened that day wasn't a haunting in the supernatural sense. There were no strange sounds or unexplained sights, but it's haunted in a much deeper way. It's the kind of story that lives on in family memory, retold carefully, quietly, with a weight behind every word. It's haunted by what-ifs, by the knowledge that a gate left open for just a moment can change everything, by the realization that childhood innocence doesn't protect you from tragedy, by the fact that identity itself can become blurred in the face of sudden loss. Even now, thinking about a 3-year-old being asked who he is in the aftermath of his twin's death is heartbreaking in a way that's hard to articulate. It speaks to how unprepared we are, as humans, to deal with the sudden, irreversible nature of death, especially when it involves children, especially when it happens so fast that there's no time to say goodbye. My dad survived, but surviving doesn't mean untouched. He lived the rest of his life carrying the echo of someone who never got the chance to grow up. A brother who existed, mattered, and was loved, even if his time was heartbreakingly short. For the family, that day became a dividing line. Life before the accident, life after it. Nothing ever fully returned to what it was meant to be because something irreplaceable was gone. It's one of those stories that doesn't need embellishment. The facts alone are enough. A yard, a ball, a truck, a moment, and a loss so profound that it still resonates decades later. There's no lesson that makes it easier, no moral that ties it up neatly, just the stark reminder of how fragile life is, how quickly it can be taken, and how the consequences of one brief moment can ripple outward for generations. That's what makes it so haunting, not because it's scary, but because it's real. That night still lives in my body more than it does in my memory. I can tell the story clearly. I can explain every detail, but the real weight of it is something that sits deeper than words. It was one of those moments where life splits cleanly into a before and an after, even though on the outside, nothing about me looks different. There were 4 of us in the car, friends, young, careless in the way people are when they believe they have time, when danger still feels theoretical instead of real. We were driving on the highway in the middle of a blizzard. The kind of blizzard where visibility drops without warning, where the world turns white and depth disappears. Snow was coming down hard, thick and heavy, sticking to everything. The road looked deceptively open, but it wasn't safe. Not even close. I was driving. We were doing about 85 miles per hour. That fact alone makes my stomach twist now. At the time, it didn't feel insane. It felt fast, sure, but not terrifying. Cars were still passing. The road was still moving. There was that false confidence you get when you haven't been punished yet. When nothing bad has happened, your brain convinces you that nothing will. Then it happened. The car started to lose traction. It wasn't dramatic at first, just a subtle shift, like the road itself had moved under us. The steering wheel suddenly felt lighter, less connected. The car veered slightly to one side. I reacted instinctively, correcting the wheel, easing it back. For a split second, I thought I had it under control, and then it veered the other way. Harder? That was the moment when everything slowed down and sped up at the same time. The wheel stopped responding the way it should. The tires weren't gripping anymore. The road was no longer something I could control. I remember thinking very clearly, this is bad. This is really bad. I tried to correct it again. I couldn't. The car spun. Not a small fishtail, not a gentle slide. We spun a full 180 degrees, going around so fast that my brain struggled to catch up with what my eyes were seeing. One moment we were facing forward, the next we were moving backwards down the highway at around 80 miles per hour. Backwards, in a blizzard, with traffic. That realization didn't even fully register until later. At the time, everything went strangely quiet. Not physically quiet, but mentally. The kind of silence that happens when shock takes over. No one screamed. No one said anything. There was no time for panic to form words. The only sound I remember clearly is the windshield wipers. Swish, swish, swish. And that sound still messes with me sometimes. It was so calm, so ordinary, completely disconnected from the chaos that was happening. The wipers kept moving like nothing was wrong, like we weren't sliding backward at highway speed, like our lives weren't balanced on a fraction of a second. Then we hit the ditch. The impact itself is fuzzy. I don't remember the exact moment of contact in a clean way. What I remember is the snow. The ditch was packed with about 6 feet of it. And when we went into it, the snow didn't just hit the car, it swallowed it. The best way I can describe it is like pulling a shirt over your head. 1 second you can see, the next second everything is white and muffled and close. Snow filled the windshield, the windows. The air felt heavy, like the world had closed in on us all at once. For a moment there was nothing, no sound, no movement, just white. That moment was terrifying in hindsight, but at the time, my brain was still in survival mode. It hadn't caught up to fear yet. It was just processing. Are we stopped? Are we alive? Is the car on fire? Is anyone screaming? Then we started moving. Doors opening, someone coughing, someone saying my name. The realization that we were all conscious, all breathing, all able to move. We climbed out of the car one by one, our boots sinking deep into the snow, our breath coming out in sharp clouds. No one was injured, not a scratch, no blood, no broken bones, no screaming pain. Just shock and adrenaline, and the overwhelming realization that we were standing outside a wrecked car in the middle of a blizzard. Then we looked at the car. That's when the reality really hit. The car had gone straight between 2 trees, not brushed them, not clipped them, straight between them. They were close enough that if we had hit either one, even slightly, we probably wouldn't have walked away. At that speed, a tree isn't just an obstacle. It's a wall. It's a sudden stop. It's the kind of impact that doesn't give you a second chance. If we had hit those trees, there's a very real chance I wouldn't be here writing this. There's a very real chance that 3 other people would have died with me. The difference between that outcome and the one we got was measured in inches, maybe less. Standing there in the snow, looking at that gap between the trees, I felt something I'd never felt before. Not fear, not relief. Something heavier. Something that settled deep in my chest. Responsibility. I was the one behind the wheel. I was the one going too fast. I was the one who made the decisions that led us there. That realization didn't hit me all at once. It crept in slowly after the adrenaline started to fade, after the shock wore off enough for my thoughts to line up properly. I kept replaying the spin in my head. The moment the car veered, the moment I lost control, the sound of the wipers, the snow closing in. That night, I came within inches of killing myself and 3 other people. That's not dramatic. That's not exaggeration. That's just the truth. We were lucky. Unreasonably lucky. The kind of lucky that makes you uncomfortable when you think about it too long. Because luck isn't something you can rely on. It doesn't show up on command. It doesn't explain itself. It just appears, or it doesn't. We stood there for a while, talking quietly. Our voices different than they had been before. Quieter, slower. Like we were afraid to raise them too much. Afraid to break something fragile that had settled over us. Traffic kept passing on the highway, headlights streaking through the snow, drivers unaware of how close they had just come to witnessing something horrific. Eventually, help came. The practical parts of the situation took over. Tow trucks, calls, logistics. All of it felt distant, like it was happening to someone else. My body was there, but my mind kept drifting back to that moment of silence before the impact. Later that night, when everything was over, when we were somewhere warm and safe, when everyone else was trying to relax or joke or calm down, it hit me fully. I couldn't stop shaking. Not visibly, not in a way anyone else noticed, but inside. My thoughts wouldn't slow down. Every time I closed my eyes, I felt the car spin again. I heard the wipers. I saw the snow. I felt that weightless moment where control disappeared. Sleep didn't come easily after that. In the days that followed, people told us how lucky we were. And they were right. Completely right. But hearing it over and over made it sink in deeper. Lucky meant it could have gone the other way. Lucky meant there was an outcome where we didn't walk away. Lucky meant there were versions of that night where parents got phone calls, where lives ended on a snowy highway. I thought a lot about those trees. I still do. Sometimes I picture the car hitting one of them. I imagine the sound it would have made. I imagine the sudden stop. I imagine what the inside of the car would have looked like. Those thoughts aren't pleasant, and I don't indulge them often, but they show up anyway, uninvited. That night changed how I drive. Not in a casual, I'll be a little more careful way. In a fundamental way. Speed feels different now. Weather feels different. The idea of control feels different. I know in my bones how quickly it can disappear, how one small mistake, one patch of ice, one overcorrection, can turn into something irreversible. It also changed how I think about responsibility. When you're driving alone, it's easy to forget what's at stake. When you have other people in the car, that changes. Their lives are in your hands, whether you want that responsibility or not. That night forced me to face that reality in the most brutal way possible, without actually paying the ultimate price for it. Sometimes I wonder why we walked away, why the car went between the trees instead of into them, why the snow was deep enough to cushion the impact instead of shallow enough to flip us, why no one got hurt. I don't have answers to those questions. I don't know if there's a reason. I don't know if it was pure chance or something else. I just know that when I stood there in the snow, staring at that gap between the trees, I felt like I had been given something back that I didn't deserve. Time. That night gave me time. Time to learn. Time to change. Time to grow older and look back and understand what almost happened. A lot of near-death stories talk about bright lights or dramatic realizations. Mine was quieter than that. It was the sound of windshield wipers, the feeling of snow closing in, the sight of two trees standing exactly where they could have ended everything. I don't tell this story to sound brave. I don't tell it to sound reckless. I tell it because it reminds me how thin the line is between normal life and absolute disaster. How quickly things can go wrong. How much responsibility we carry without always acknowledging it. That night, I was inches away from destroying 4 lives. Instead, we walked away. Alive, uninjured, changed. And every time I drive in bad weather now, every time I slow down when others don't, every time I feel that old instinct to push it and choose not to, I think about that blizzard, that spin, that ditch, and those 2 trees. And I remember how lucky we were, and how close we came to never getting the chance to remember anything at all. A few years ago, something happened to me that I still don't have a name for. I don't tell it often because it sounds ridiculous when you say it out loud, like something pulled from a bad creepypasta or an internet horror story. But I know what I saw. And more importantly, I know how it felt. That part is impossible to fake or forget. I was staying at my aunt's house at the time. It was a quiet place. The kind of house that settles into complete stillness at night. The bedroom I was sleeping in was downstairs, which already felt a little isolating once the rest of the house went dark. Everyone else was asleep upstairs, and by the time this happened, the house had been silent for hours. It was around 3 in the morning when I woke up. Not from a nightmare, not from a noise, just that sudden, annoying kind of hunger that makes it impossible to fall back asleep. I lay there for a bit, staring at the ceiling, debating whether it was worth getting up. Eventually, hunger won. I got out of bed and walked into the kitchen. The kitchen layout is something I remember clearly. It had 2 large windows that faced directly into the backyard. During the day, they let in a lot of light and made the room feel open. At night, they did the opposite. They turned the kitchen into a box surrounded by darkness. There were no curtains drawn that night, just bare glass reflecting the dim interior lights back at you. I flicked on a small light, enough to see, but not enough to fully chase away the shadows. As I stepped further into the kitchen, my eyes adjusted, and that's when I saw it. At first, my brain didn't register it as anything real. Through one of the windows, right at eye level, there was something staring at me. Not a reflection, not a shadow from inside the house, something on the other side of the glass. What I saw looked like a human head, but wrong in ways that are hard to describe unless you've seen something that immediately triggers that deep, instinctive sense of, this isn't right. It didn't have a face. No eyes, no nose, no mouth that I could make out. Just the shape of a head, smooth and blank where features should have been. The shape itself was off. More triangular than a normal human head, narrowing toward the chin in a way that didn't look natural. The proportions didn't match anyone I'd ever seen. And behind it, barely visible in the low light, was a body that seemed too big for the head, too wide, too solid. It was hard to tell exactly how large it was, but I could tell it wasn't standing upright. It looked like it was kneeling, lowering itself so that its head was level with the window, pressed close to the glass. It wasn't moving. It wasn't banging on the window or trying to get in. It was just there, staring. I froze. Every normal reaction I should have had lined up in my head all at once. Run, scream, turn around, get away from the window, wake someone up. That's what a logical person would do. That's what I would expect myself to do. But I didn't. Instead, something else happened. I felt this overwhelming compulsion to walk toward it. Not curiosity in a normal sense. Not bravery. Not defiance. It felt more like being pulled, like my body had decided something without consulting my brain. My feet moved before I fully realized what I was doing. Each step felt strangely calm, like my fear had been muted or pushed aside. I walked closer to the window. The closer I got, the less I could see. The darkness outside swallowed detail, and the reflection of the kitchen lights blurred the shape even more. But the presence didn't fade. If anything, it felt stronger, heavier, like I was stepping into the focus of something's attention. I remember thinking very distantly that this was wrong, that I shouldn't be doing this. But that thought felt weak, like it was being held underwater. I got to within about 2 feet of the glass. That's when whatever had been suppressing my fear snapped. It was sudden and violent, like a switch being flipped in my head. 1 second I was calm, walking forward, and the next my brain was screaming at me. "Run! You idiot! Run!" Pure panic flooded my body all at once. My heart slammed into my ribs, my chest tightened. My legs felt like they were filled with electricity. The compulsion vanished, replaced by a raw animal fear that didn't need explanation. I didn't look at it again. I turned around and ran. I ran back down the short hallway and into the bedroom, slamming the door behind me. I didn't stop to turn on lights. I didn't stop to check if it was following me. I dove into bed, pulled the covers over myself, and lay there shaking, listening for sounds that never came. I didn't sleep after that. I lay there until morning, staring at the wall, replaying the image over and over in my mind. The blank head, the wrong shape, the way it looked like it was kneeling, the way it felt like it wanted me to come closer, or needed me to. When the sun finally came up, everything looked normal. The backyard was empty, no footprints, no disturbed grass, nothing out of place. In daylight, the kitchen windows looked harmless, almost ridiculous. Just glass and reflections. I didn't tell anyone right away. I didn't know how to explain it without sounding insane. Even now, writing it down, I know how it sounds. It sounds like a bad Slender Man knockoff. It sounds like something my brain made up in the dark. It sounds like sleep deprivation, or imagination, or fear playing tricks on me. But here's the thing. I wasn't half asleep. I wasn't dreaming. I wasn't drunk or high or panicking beforehand. And I've never felt that kind of compulsion before or since. Fear, I understand. Imagination, I understand. But that pull, that calm urge to walk towards something I should have been terrified of, that's what haunts me. It felt external, like it didn't belong to me. Like my survival instincts were overridden for a moment and then violently restored. To this day, I don't know what it was. I don't know if it was an animal distorted by darkness and my own mind. I don't know if it was some kind of hallucination. I don't know if it was something else entirely. Sometimes, half joking and half not, I tell myself it was aliens or something not from here, because at least that explanation acknowledges how wrong it felt. What I do know is this. Something was outside that window, and for a brief moment, it had more influence over me than my own fear. That's what chills me. Not the shape, not the lack of a face, not even the idea of something watching me in the dark. It's the fact that instead of running, my first instinct was to walk toward it. And that is something I still don't understand. If you're still here, then these stories didn't simply fade away. They settled in. Every story you heard tonight came from real moments, real people. and real situations where something felt off or nearly went wrong. If you want to keep exploring stories that linger in your thoughts long after the night grows quiet, consider subscribing to Midnight Whispers. There are more stories waiting in the dark, and not all of them let you leave in time.